Welcome, welcome. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here from the Wealth Movement. You're joining us today with the Wellther Series. And the Wellther Series is about people that I've come to know and I've met and I've interacted with. And I believe that their insights and ideas are fabulous to share about business and life. Today, I have someone who is passionate about mentoring, and that's the topic we're going to explore from all different kinds of angles. And it's Doug Lawrence, and Doug and I are involved in the international mentoring community. It's something we've brought together. It's housed underneath Wealth Movement at the moment, but Doug also has his own company called Talent Seed People Services. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, what can we do to help people navigate people in organizations or in their own professional growth if they're coming at it from an individual point of view? And I thought it'd be really great to have Doug come on and just share some of his ideas that are real for us in today's workplaces or real for us in our lives if we're going to take up the mantle of mentoring. And before we jump into our topic for today is, Doug, can you just give us a little bit more of your background so we get to know who you are?
Most definitely, Stephen. I'm a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. I retired with just a couple months shy of 25 years. I was truly blessed during my time in the force, where part of the time I spent in some very small, isolated Inuit communities, where learning how to interact and communicate with people who didn't speak the same language has obviously served me well as I went on my journey in a leadership capacity, but also in a mentoring capacity. So I have probably in excess, and it's the, what do we call them? The gray hairs of wisdom that I have on the top of my head, that I have over 40 years of leadership and mentoring experience. And I am very passionate because I saw an opportunity for us to take mentoring to a whole new different level, to give us a more deeper, more richer experience. And that's the journey that I'm on now. And that, you know, you and I we both believe in the gift of mentoring, and we both are pouring our heart and our soul into taking this to a whole new different place that it's never gone before. But so on top of, the work that I did in the RCMP, I've been in, like I mentioned, in some leadership and mentoring positions for over 40 years now. And it's from that I've become extremely passionate, because I've seen the difference. It's a life-changing experience. And so I've seen what that difference can actually be for people that are open and willing to want to experience that type of change.
And you've also are moving into this mentoring in the workplace program. You've done some consulting work around that, and you're bringing that into the mix that we're sharing. But what was the biggest learning that you took from creating a mentoring in the workplace program? That's just before we get into the topics for today. But I think it would be interesting for everyone's listening is, what was that sage advice or that one piece of wisdom you'd like to share about mentoring in the workplace programs?
I'm going to use the word pain. The pain that I see the employees going through because the organization, when you look at it in the broader context, has become disconnected. There's all kinds of turmoil that's taking place. And don't get me wrong, not every place is like this, but for some strange reason, my calling has taken me to a couple of these organizations where, you know, the disengaged employee, the disgruntled employee, the productivity not where it could be, organization isn't as efficient as it could be, employees are, like I said, disengaged, but more importantly, are not loyal to the organization. So there's all of those things that I'm seeing that are taking place, and the ones that I'm getting my foot in the door to be able to see what we can do. But the sad part, I think the learning curve for me through all of this was that organizations have to have some degree of bravado to be able to make that decision. to kind of open up their kimono and let somebody come inside and start to ask questions, start to talk to employees, to really truly get a sense of flavor for what is going on in the organization. And then to embrace that information that comes as a result of that process is to embrace that information and say, we're just not going to put it on the shelf and leave it. We're actually going to create an action plan, and we're going to look at how can we change things in the organization to make it just that much better. For me, that was kind of the pearl of wisdom that I saw, was that it takes a brave organization to be able to open their kimono and let someone come in and take a look. But if you make that decision, the results are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it's the sense of treating mentoring like a movement. It's not about creating a mentoring culture. It's really about having a movement that involves mentoring, if you want to, mentoring movement, because it's something that's going to weave through the whole organization. And I know that we've had a lot of conversations about this as well, and over the time. And what that did was that brought up something called effective mentoring, which is near and dear to you in terms of the definition of what's certainly a current sense of mentoring. But just before we dive into that, what do we mean by mentoring? Why don't you and I just have a little conversation about what we mean by mentoring? What's mentoring mean to you?
For me, it's very simply explained as it's a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee are going to learn and grow both personally and professionally.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And the angle that I would add to that whenever we have these conversations in our presentations to people is that mentoring is really having the mentee asking questions of the mentor, and asking questions to get into the lived experience of the mentor, to tap into the legacy that the mentor has already started in their lives. And you'll notice I didn't say it by age, right? And neither Doug and I said it by age. It's really your lived experience, tapping into a way of knowing and being and doing and having that someone else can benefit, or the mentee can benefit from it.
I think, and this kind of gets us off into a different area, but I don't want to lose sight of it. But this is where the storytelling, story sharing comes into play. And for the mentor to be able to share the stories and feel comfortable with the mentee asking questions to kind of probe a little bit further. Tell me more about that experience and, stuff like that. That's a part that under the old philosophy, the old style of mentoring, that was not something that we did a very good job of.
True. Which then leads us now into this notion of effective mentoring. And it's a term that you've brought to my attention, the way that you look at it. So let's just share a little bit of something about effective mentoring and maybe how that's affecting the paradigm shift with mentoring. Let's sort of unpack that part.
So this goes back, probably 4 or 5 years for me now, where when I looked at mentoring, what I saw was, as it's been described to me, was the old traditional style of mentoring, which was, as I mentioned, the gray hairs of wisdom, but the gray-haired old sage on the top of the mountain basically saying, this is the way I've done it for the last 20 years, so therefore you should go forth and do it that way, and no questions asked. And so the paradigm shift that has taken place is we still have a place for the old traditional style. Don't get me wrong. There's still a place for that still to be used. But what we're doing now is what we call effective or modern mentoring. And I prefer effective as a stronger term. But what that is the definition we just shared is actually how that all fits. Two-way, trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee are going to learn and grow personally and professionally. That's the paradigm shift. It's now become, it's almost like a collaborative partnership. that we're going to navigate our way through, the trials and tribulations of life as a whole, life and work. We're going to navigate through, through both those, we'll call them minefields for lack of a better choice of words, but we're going to navigate our way through those with the idea in mind that I know probably the best way for me to set the stage for this is I know that when I sit down and spend some time with one of my mentees, I know that I'm going to come away from there having learned something. I'm going to learn something, whether it be on the personal front about me as an individual, how I react to different situations, so on and so forth. But it also can be from a professional, so from a career development perspective.
Yeah. And that brings out back in your definition, and you mentioned again here, is that trusted relationship, right? And building that, growing that, and getting that up and going. What is it that is needed, or what's the stimulus for a trusted relationship? Because you can have a relationship, but there's something about adding the trust factor to this. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Because that's a very specific term in your definition.
Well, and for me, when I talk about one of the foundational pieces of effective mentoring is that trusted relationship. It's like the building a house and not having a strong foundation to put the walls and stuff on top of. And I use that analogy a lot when I speak, speak publicly and talk about effective mentoring and what it all means. But the trusted relationship part is essential, because in order for the relationship to be truly successful, for this to be an effective mentoring relationship, there needs to be trust. And the way that we develop trust is we, as a mentor, have to be comfortable enough to be able to share something that may be very personal to us that we normally don't share readily to somebody. And so by sharing that particular piece of information, that traumatic experience that has had an impact on you, by sharing that with the mentee, the person you're spending time, you're already then starting to build the stepping stones for trust to be in place. Now, not everybody is comfortable doing that. And if you're not, then I suggest, you may not want to go there in the first place. But in order for the relationship to be really, truly successful, there has to be that willingness, that humbleness, that humility to be able to say, this is what happened to me. I don't know how you would have dealt with it, but this is what happened to me. And I want you to understand how it made me feel. And so sharing that with the person you're spending time with goes a long way to build that trusting relationship.
And that starts right at the very beginning when you're having your conversation. Even I look at trust as sort of, there's a contract that's understood between you.
Yeah.
There is a sense of, okay, do both of us have the competence to enter into this, even if it's how to ask a question from a mentee point of view. If not,
right,
you need to get that up pretty quickly. There's the continuance of staying with it, with the commitment of being there and attending. And very much about that whole capacity is that, and you use it as to grow both personally and professionally. This is what we're talking about, this trusted, and it's sort of building on those C words. Yeah. And that's where you're going to be able to get the this relationship. And I guess there's another C word I would add into that would be communication, right? There's that whole storyline around communication, and knowing the navigation and people services work that you do and the things that you've been talking about around the organization culture work that you're doing, communication's got to be a major player in what you're doing and what this mentoring relationship is all about. Yes? No?
Yeah, and what I typically will do is when I talk about effective mentoring, so there's mentoring and then there's effective mentoring, sort of, you look at the paradigm or the sort of the pendulum swinging. The same can be said for communication. There's communication, and then on the other end of the pendulum is effective communication. When I take a look at that, there's so many different variables to take into account. And I'm just going to touch on them briefly here, but when I look at if I'm having a conversation, an effective conversation with somebody I'm spending time with in a mentoring arrangement, I'm listening for trigger words in the conversation. So there may be things such as, well, I don't think I can do that, or I'm not comfortable doing that, which can then lead itself to me to start to ask some different questions around self-esteem and self-confidence. There may also be times where an individual is experiencing some grief or whatever and may not be quite ready to talk about it, and they will deflect away. They will make a comment trying to shift you from asking any more questions around that. They'll deflect you away from there. We are sometimes prone to, as I sometimes call it, lock loading and firing, instead of taking a brief pause to think about how is what I'm about to say going to be received. So there's a number of different things. We talk about active listening. Am I listening, but am I also hearing what the other person is saying? And what about body language? So as you can tell, there's a number of different things that we need to be thinking about when we're talking about effective communication.
And the trust is going to come when that is effective. I'm sitting there and I'm present with you. These are the kind of things that we're talking about. So, but there's another part of your definition that is sort of twofold, and that's that personal and personal and professional. Yeah. The personal and the professional. There's something going on, and you might be listening a little differently, right? You might be communicating a little differently. Yeah. There's a trust that goes both with the personal and the professional. You want to share a little bit about your insights about the personal professional aspects of effective mentoring?
So when I take a look at a lot of the corporate mentoring programs today, they are very much focused on the professional growth. And I get that. I understand that, that's a business reason for wanting to establish, mentoring in the workplace is for the professional growth.
But we're also talking about the people who are working the machines, the person who is cleaning the floors, to the person who's running the financial accounts and all that. Professional goes across all of those. So I just want to, okay. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Okay.
But here's the thing that we don't take into account is that if the employee, we'll use just an employee as an example, if a person in an organization is not whole, then that's going to have an impact on their ability to be able to grow professionally. What it ends up becoming is an obstacle, a barrier, whatever, a blockade, whatever term you want to use. I see this so very often where it can be something as simple as, and simple is probably not a fair word, but it can be something that is, say, like self-esteem, self-confidence. And because they don't have that confidence, they don't believe in themselves as an individual, it has a huge impact on their work. I've worked with so many different people that that was an issue, and it was to get them to start to kind of rise out of the trenches and start to see, what their contribution was, not only to the organization that they work for, but also for the community that they're living in, for their family and all of that. It has such a huge impact. And so when I talk about personal and professional growth, it's my quest to drive that idea home to people that in a mentoring arrangement, in mentoring in the workplace, no matter where you engage in mentoring, there is always going to be that personal side. And that's almost your first point where you need to look first. And then we'll talk about the professional growth side. Because if I spend time with you and we can work to a common understanding, a common place where you believe in who you are, where you're whole as a person, the professional growth side of things, it's a cakewalk. It's going to be something that you'll be able to navigate your way through there because you believe in who you are as a person and you believe in the work that you're capable of doing. I have real quick sideline story here. I worked with a young person that had that very same problem. Toxic workplace, was extremely negative, low self-esteem, didn't believe in themselves. And we spent time together. And it ended up where, number one, we had to find a different environment for that employee to work in, which we did. And she became the champion of positive energy in the organization. And God help anyone that walked up to her desk and started talking negative, because she'd just say, you get away from me and come back when you can talk positive. That, without that, her work and her, she was such a dynamic worker in the workplace that they actually created a full-time position for her. She had gone into a term role, and because of her positivity in the workplace, because of the quality of work that she was now doing, because trust me, before that, it wouldn't get passed by anybody. They actually created a full-time position for her. And even to this very day today, she's a very positive, very upbeat person, believes in who she is. And she's just an absolute pleasure and dream to be around, you know, when you sit down and have a conversation with her. That's why it's so important to, you know, to focus on the personal side first.
And I think that what we're sharing here by an indirect way is that what you're learning about mentoring the workplace can also come back home. Trusted relationships at home with family and friends, the effective communication with family and friends, the how do you help each other to be personally great when you're at home, right? Mentoring can play itself out really well there. Parent with the child, hey, the child with the parent.
Yeah.
This is something we've been talking about. So it's really great what you've been able to do to share these insights about effective mentoring. And just as we're looking to close up today's connection, what would be one piece of advice, one nugget that you'd want to give to people around effective mentoring that would get them up and going and or just improving what it is that they do already?
If you are willing to embrace the gift of mentoring and let it be a part of your life, you are entering into a life-changing, life-altering experience that will literally blow the doors off of anything you've ever experienced before.
So with that, let's get those doors open, folks. Thanks very much. Appreciate it, Doug.
Thank you.